All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Legacy Running Podcast. I am Dr. Sarah, and today we are going to be talking about injury prevention for runners. Now, I know when most people hear that, they think I'm going to talk about specific exercises or the shoes that we should wear, how much we should stretch, so on and so forth. But today I want to talk about something a little different, and I'm going to frame it in the works of kind of a novice runner, but you can take this and apply it to whatever stage that you're in. So I'm going to be talking about our running hygiene, our running economy in the terms and kind of against the framework of this battery analogy. So, what got me thinking about this is I run with a couple run groups, and a lot of people are always like, oh my gosh, I have this injury. My knee hurts, my hip hurts, so on and so forth. And, of course I'm a PT, so I just listen and I'm always absorbing their information. But what I will often say is a lot of these people that are dealing with these kind of chronic nagging injuries is I listen to their training cycles and I'm like, I think you're just doing too much. So they'll do, a 20 miler on Saturday, but then they're there at 6 a.m. running the 7 miler on Friday, and then they ran speed work on Wednesday. And, the whole week was just jam packed full with running. And inherently, that is not bad. Maybe these people have actually developed their tissue tolerance to be able to withstand the loads of that much running, and they're just having an injury. Maybe that's the truth. However, maybe they're not allowing their body to have an adequate amount of recovery, and then they're getting these kind of chronic nagging injuries because they're constantly in an up training cycle. So let me break this down for you guys. This is not at all by any means like specific medical advice for each person, but I just want you to think of this as like a broad framework if you are planning your training cycles or trying to get back into running or even starting running for the first time. So I want you to think of your body as an iPhone. So you are, I don't even know what version we're on now, but you are a brand spanking new iPhone, and today you get 100% battery life. The only sad news is your activities of daily living are going to take up 60% of your battery life, okay? So that is waking up in the morning, that's making breakfast, that's hanging out with your kids, going to work, commuting home, talking on the phone, so on and so forth. So those are just the things, the incidental things that you kind of just have to do to get through your day. The 40% that you have left, that's what you get to do on things that are outside your daily norm. So if you're going to start running, that's outside your daily norm. If your kids are being extra crazy and you have to run after them, that's outside your daily norm, so on and so forth. So let's say this day you start with 100% battery. You use 60% of your battery at work, so on and so forth, and then you're going to go for a run after work. And let's say this run is just exhausting for you. You haven't ran in a long time. It was just a lot of work on your body, and you actually used 30% of your battery. So now you only have just a little bit left of your battery for the rest of the day. And unfortunately, that night you didn't get enough sleep. So you weren't able to recharge your battery all the way up to 100%. So you're going into Tuesday a little bit down. So you're going in, let's say, at 90%. Okay, so let's say that is scenario one. That's new runner number one. All right, new runner number two, let's look at their scenario. So again, they wake up with a 100% full battery. They use 60% on their activities of daily living. This run was a little bit easier for them. Maybe they did less mileage, they did run walk. It didn't feel as fatiguing. I mean, it was still hard, but not as fatiguing. And they used 20% of their daily battery. So now they're at 80%, and then they have 20% left for the rest of the day. They were able to get a full night's sleep, maybe a little bit of craziness with the kids at night. So when they woke up in the morning, basically their battery was back to 100%. So if we look at these two runners and then we say, okay, what's going to happen on Tuesday? How much energy availability are we going to have on Tuesday? Runner number one, who was going in a little bit lower, if they go back and do that same run again, and then they have maybe potentially another poor night's sleep or a high stress environment, they're already setting themselves up for an injury because their body is not able to recover and get back to that 100% mark to conquer the next day. Runner number 2, on the other hand, actually is able to probably go for another run that day. But what happens if they push it on that run? They push it pretty hard, and then they get, up into that 60% for their daily activity. Maybe they do 40% for their run, and then they have to stay up nice and late because, their favorite show's on TV, and then they're going into their next day and they're in that deficit already. So, what I like to say for new runners, and if you're trying to just increase your mileage or get back into running, is let's just give ourselves a day off in between running. Maybe for those first couple of weeks while we're getting back to it, let's space out those days so we are able to get that adequate recovery for our muscles, for our cartilage, for our nerves, for everything to just breathe a little bit. And then we are already going to go into our next run feeling a little bit better. Not everyone has to do this, but if you're just looking at this straight up battery analogy, for the first few weeks, this is just what I love to have my runners do so they can feel, okay, this is what it feels like when I'm running rested versus this is what it feels like when I'm running a little bit ragged. And then as they're going and they're going through the rest of the variables that I will talk about, then they can start to run back-to-back days. So how are ways that we can build our battery? The first few, most important, I think, is recovery. So taking time off from literally just not running. So let's say you're using that 60% for your day, and then after work or after whatever, you're just gonna go for a nice easy walk, and that's about 10% of your battery. And then you go out, to have dinner with your friends, that uses a little bit more of your battery. You're gonna wake up the next day pretty much again 100% recovered, and then able to run that next day. Another great way to recharge your battery is sleep. So making sure you're getting anywhere from 8 to 10 hours. If you're in a heavier training cycle, you honestly might need more sleep. If you're getting back to running, you might need more sleep to be able to fully recharge that battery. Nutrition is also an excellent one. Right after you're running, making sure that you're properly fueling. I know personally I get super appetite suppressed after running, even nauseous from time to time, but just making sure that I'm prioritizing fueling because I know that I want my battery to be nice and charged. Now, these next two variables are a little bit confusing, and these variables actually do increase. They don't increase our battery, but they increase our body's ability to withstand the demands of running. So we can do the same run and it won't take up as much charge in our battery. So the first one is actually just running itself. So if we go back to that first runner and they are the one that overran their battery because they ran really hard on that first day. Let's look at them maybe 3 weeks down the line. So let's say that runner has been practicing excellent recovery. They've been running 3 miles 3 times a week, and they've been giving themselves that day off in between, and they're starting to notice this is feeling super, super easy. I'm ready to go to the next level. And for them, maybe that's running back-to-back days, or for them, maybe that's incorporating speed work, or for them, maybe that's running, instead of 3 miles, we're now going to run 4 miles every day, or whatever it is. But the biggest increase, or like the most appropriate increase that is currently in the literature, is about 10% of your previous mileage. So increasing your mileage or your volume, or kind of whatever you're training with, about 10% is the best way for injury prevention as well. So time with running is a way to decrease the demands of what the same run will be over time. Another interesting one that can increase your kind of capacity is strength training. So strength training does work similarly with running, that if you're strength training, it will drain your battery, but over time, as you get used to the demands and the work of strength training, it will start to increase your running economy. So what used to cost you, 40% of your battery, maybe can only cost you 15% of your battery now. So being consistent with running and being consistent with strength training are two ways to increase your running economy. So I hope that wasn't too confusing. I know the battery analogy was really helpful for me to just see like, okay, running is actually a relative stressor on my body. And if I am not training up to the demands that I want, yes, I will be able to sustain for a little bit of time, but then my body is probably going to start to hate me, and I'm probably going to start to develop some injuries over time. So let me give you guys an example of someone that I've worked with. I had a gal who was suffering with a known labral tear in her hip, and her biggest goal was to be able to increase her mileage and be able to run longer distances to get to half marathon, marathons, and ultras. And she found that every time she was increasing her mileage, she would get to 6 miles and she would just completely peter out. Like her hip would flare up. She just found herself exhausted, overworked, and it just wasn't working for her. So the biggest thing that we did is I really dissected. I dissected what was going on at her hip and maybe any injury deficits that she had. Or weaknesses that she had at the hip, any motor control deficits, all those nitty gritty kind of PT-esque things. But then I also just looked at what her general training cycle was, and we really ramped back and we ramped down from what she was doing. And we started off super easy. We started off, I think, like maybe 2-3 miles. This is relatively easy for her, a couple of times a week. And then on her off days, we did lighter motor control, kind of strength training things to build up her hips tolerance to be able to run. And then we gave her some really good recovery days in there. And then I was able to kind of see how she responded to those things. Did she have any flare-ups? Was she feeling like overworked and exhausted? Just giving her that time to kind of reflect, or giving us that time to reflect and see, okay, you did pretty well with this mileage. Everything felt really good. There was no flare-ups. Okay, I'm confident that we can move forward to the next step. And then we increased mileage around that 10% gradient for the next week. And then we did the same thing for the next week. And you know what? In this whole series, it was never a perfect linear process. There's always stuff that's going to go on where, okay, this week I'm traveling, and now instead of my just activities of daily living battery taking up 60%, it's actually taking up 80% today because my travel day was super stressful. So then when I went to go run, it actually did flare at my hip, and I only ran 4 miles as opposed to, the 8 that you had me do. And oh my gosh, am I getting better? Yes, you are getting better, but just looking at that battery analogy, you just notice that you just had less in the tank. So I will say we did try to progress her schedule, her running linearly, but there's always stuff that's going to go on. And it doesn't mean that you're getting worse. It just means that is life. That's how our bodies work. We're not like a perfect plug and chug system. We are so dynamic, and there's so many things that are happening. But over time, we were able to progress her past that 6 mile distance, and it was a huge accomplishment. I mean, mentally, it was hard to even imagine getting past that at one time, and then we got there, and it was freaking awesome. And then our plan is to just keep progressing her with those days off in between via her running mileage, kind of increase her strength training to be a little bit harder, and then hit that half marathon. And then from there, which I do really recommend in between training cycles, is just having some sort of like a deload week, like a week where you're just like kind of not running that much. Maybe you're not strength training as much. Maybe you're practicing more mobility work, more stretching, yoga, just things that are more restorative and relaxing. So your body really has a chance to like completely decompress. And then when you go to push again, you kind of get to start from that 100% battery. So I hope that analogy, I hope walking through that was helpful for you guys. Maybe if it's confusing, don't pay as much attention to the numbers, but just the general principle that running is a relative stressor on the body, and you're going to need to increase the running at that 10% mark to be able to adequately meet the demands and not overstress your body. And you can try to progress linearly, but it's not always going to work perfectly that way. I will say, if this was confusing for you guys, this is an excellent reason to hire a run coach, to work with a physical therapist, to work with a physical therapist that is a run coach, so they can kind of parse out these details for you, and you're not the one that has to take on all of the burden of figuring this stuff out as you're trying to prepare for a marathon, half marathon, ultra, 5K, whatever it is. So there's so much beauty in just resourcing that out, letting people that are the experts help you. If you guys want my help with this is a huge part of my Hip Return to Run program, is parsing out these variables for you and getting you back to running pain-free, confidently, to know exactly what to do every single day, and crush your goals. So if you guys want to do that, strategywithsarah.com is how you can chat with me, but feel free to follow me on all forms of socials, and I look forward to hearing from some of you guys soon.